Four in the morning right now, full moon, calm conditions. Let's go. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. So much building up to this. A new boat that I didn't quite know all that well yet. But that's the funny thing about sailing. Anxiety and nervousness can turn into elation and excitement within minutes. A beautiful sunrise seems to have that effect. We planned this trip according to the wind forecast, which showed that there was some wind heading straight offshore from east to west, exactly in the direction we needed to go to get to San Clemente Island. It's amazing how quickly coffee can get everybody stoked. Speaking of everybody, guess we might as well introduce our crew for the trip. Kara and Steve. Kara was an incredible chef. Steve, a longtime friend who I've known for over a decade now, from West Australia. It wasn't long before we were greeted by a pretty big pod of dolphins, swimming right underneath our bow and all alongside us in crystal clear blue water. I could have just sat there watching for hours as the holes of the boat cut through the perfectly clear water. The crew started feeling a little seasick. IMILOA did a pretty good job of driving herself with the autopilot. Steve, once he started feeling better, got right into a couple of projects. And Kara changed positions from the back of the boat to the front and made herself a lot more comfortable. About halfway to San Clemente Island, right as Steve happened to mention how well the engine was running, something happened. We weren't sure what, but we chopped it up to be stuff that was caught up in the fuel filters. So we pulled all three of them out, cleaned them all out, and then replaced them. That seemed to do the trick for the meantime. Once she was up and running, we were all in good spirits again. We were only a couple of hours away as long as we could keep up a 6-knot average speed. Seeing your destination come up on the horizon is pretty exciting. Even being only 60 nautical miles away, it still feels like you've just completed some spectacular voyage, that you found some far-flung land that nobody else knows about. Lucky for us, the wind picked up just as we were coming into the area. We couldn't have asked for much more. Incredible sunset, perfect wind conditions for our arrival, and a pod of dolphins that greeted us and escorted us right into the bay of the island. I swear they may have even been the same dolphins that left with us from San Diego Harbor. Perhaps they'd been with us all along. We managed to pull into the bay just at nightfall. Luckily, the moon had enough light for us to find a good anchorage.
Bobby? How do you like these? Oh yeah, look at that. That's epic. On the boat? Bottle of wine? Chef Kara in the kitchen?
The next morning, although waking up in a stunning place, something felt off. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Once we'd all woken up, however, it didn't take long for us to figure out that every single system on the boat had basically failed. Nothing was working. Realizing you've just sailed 60 nautical miles into the middle of the ocean, and suddenly just about every single system on your boat is malfunctioning or completely shot, you start to realize just how far away you are from civilization as you know it. Turns out that throughout the course of the previous day, as well as overnight, every single battery on the boat had gone dead, including the battery to start our engine. With no electronics, no instruments, we were doing things the old-fashioned way. And although we were moving slow, we started making our way north along the west side of the island. We all seemed to have different ways of coping with the stress of the situation. Kara's strategy was trying to remain as relaxed and calm as possible. Steve, on the other hand, well, let's just say there was a moment there where I thought he might abandon ship. Luckily, San Clemente Island has a military base on the northern end, so we knew we'd eventually be able to find someone for some help if needed. As we made our way north along the island, we started to see some whitewater, and I knew we were coming up to a couple of the spots that I'd scouted out on Google Earth and a couple of the charts prior to our departure. The first big bay we rounded up into had this perfect peeling right.
Whoa. I mean, that looks pretty sick.
Can we go a bit? There's a big kelp. Well, how's the kelp bed here, hey?
There was this massive kelp bed, and without a working engine, we simply couldn't make our way close enough in there.
Okay, straighten her out.
Huh?
Go ahead and straighten out.
In hindsight, I wish we'd just anchored way the hell out there and paddled for 20-30 minutes to get in that wave. I'll definitely be going back there because this one has been on my mind ever since. With our newfound motivation after finding surf, we figured out a way to use a jackery, which is a portable lithium battery, to drip charge our engine start battery using a bunch of random wires, a cigarette lighter, and a couple of other random things on the boat. Continuing north along the coastline towards our anchorage, we found a couple of other interesting spots. Waves breaking, but nothing that quite seemed rideable, or the tide wasn't right. In some cases, the kelp was just simply too thick to even get in there, let alone surf it. Wasn't long before we crossed paths with a couple of the local islanders. After a couple of hours, our portable jackery battery was actually able to drip charge enough juice into the engine start battery that we were able to start the primary engine again. Needless to say, we were all pretty happy and proud of ourselves. Coming into our next anchorage, we were greeted by a ton of local wildlife. You can see why they call it Seal Cove. The place was pretty picturesque. A beautiful little blue water cove with towering cliffs just a stone throw away, and nobody around in sight. With a couple hours of daylight we had left, we decided to go for a quick dive and spearfish. Check out the area and see if we could get some dinner for the evening. I have to admit, the 50-yard swim from the boat over to the kelp bed we were going to dive was a little bit spooky, considering the water wasn't super clear because of the big swell, and for us these were uncharted waters. The reef was alive and healthy, kelp forest was beautiful, and plenty of little fish species all over the place, including the good old Garibaldi. A couple of the local Seal Cove residents decided to come over and play around with us a bit. Okay, I managed to get the first fish of the day. On our way back to the boat, we suddenly found ourselves surrounded by 4 or 5 of these giant creatures swimming down deep. Honestly, I think we all thought the worst in the first few minutes there, but as we got closer, we realized that they were actually fish. In fact, they were giant black sea bass, which is an endangered species here in California. Turns out there's a whole school of them that live here in this cove, and because people can't hunt them or fish them, they're not afraid of humans, so they were just cruising right up to us and hanging out. With our new friends swimming underneath our boat the rest of the evening, we enjoyed a picture-perfect sunset and a couple of cold beers as we barbecued up the fish that we caught. Kara was super keen on checking out one more kelp bed before we left, so I taxied her over in the dinghy. I have to say, later on looking at her footage, I'm pretty bummed I didn't jump in the water with her. Turns out a lobster boat with a couple of friendly guys had anchored up in the bay with us that night. The next morning they gifted us a couple of free lobster and wished us well on the rest of our voyage. We continued north along the island, all of us pretty keen to get into some waves. And suddenly there it was, a series of reefs, one of which was a perfect A-frame. Absolutely frothing, we anchored the boat outside the kelp bed and worked our way in slowly using a combination of the rowing oars and our outboard engine.
Oh my goodness. What? Go, buddy. So many rocks.
I think there may have been a better tide to surf this wave, but nonetheless, we got a couple of really sick waves. Just to be out there surfing on this island that none of us had ever been to, waves that very few people have probably ever surfed, was so exciting. After our session, we continued north because we had to round the tip of the island to get to our next anchorage, and we found what is by far probably one of the best waves on the island. Although we saw a couple of good waves come in, I think we were there at the wrong tide, and there was just so much kelp that it would have been impossible for us to get anywhere near it. We pulled into the bay that would be our anchorage for the night just before sunset, and as we rounded the point, I could have sworn I saw a couple of waves and people surfing off in the distance. As soon as we anchored, my wetsuit was on. I grabbed my board, threw it in the dinghy, and paddled my way over there to check things out. In celebration of finding some epic waves, as well as simply making it from the southern point of the island to the northern point without any serious catastrophes, we cooked up quite the feast.
Hello!
The age-old saying of red skies in the morning, sailor's warning, seems to be pretty accurate. With an early morning departure, we calculated that we could arrive at Catalina Island before the winds became too intense. Nonetheless, as soon as we departed from our anchorage, we were already getting wet. The weather turned out to be just a scattered mix of squalls, and as soon as the first rains passed, it was all rainbows and dolphins. The wind dropped back down below 20 knots and was coming at just the right angle for us to raise our asymmetrical spinnaker. This little catamaran could really fly when you got her on the right angle of wind. Making such good speed, it wasn't long before the towering cliffs of Catalina Island came into view. There's a certain excitement that you feel coming into port after having been at sea, regardless of however long that may have been. Santa Catalina Island has quite an interesting history. Originally inhabited by Native Americans, then claimed by the Spanish Empire, later turned over to Mexico and eventually to the United States, and over the course of the next 125 years would become the unique destination that it is today. Steve, being a good first mate, gave a few practice swipes with the boat hook before getting to our mooring ball. I have to admit, IMILOA looked pretty damn beautiful, anchored up in the Bay of Avalon as we headed into town. Being good sailors, we set all other priorities aside till later and headed straight for the town pub. We didn't get any footage throughout the rest of our stay on Avalon, but we spent the afternoon visiting a couple of supply shops, the grocery market, and every open bar until 2 in the morning. We got a late start the following day, feeling a bit hungover. But the weather was ideal, although not too much wind. We didn't mind motor sailing our way home. On our way to Oceanside, we caught one of the most spectacular sunsets I've ever seen. It was amazing to think we were so far out there just a few days ago. It was a pretty special moment rounding the tip of Point Loma and passing the iconic lighthouse that I'd always seen growing up. In total, we had sailed IMILOA nearly 200 nautical miles. Not bad for a first voyage. There were a lot of people that chipped in and got IMILOA ready for her first adventure. I hope each of them gets the chance to see this video and know how grateful I am for their help.
Mechanical work party. We got the electrician. We've got the diesel mechanic. We've got multiple assistants.
Power, right? If this has power, yep. Right? If this has power, I'll wire that straight into the...
Especially Steve, who handled so well all of our trials and errors. Everything from broken down engines to figuring out the spinnaker, he was right there ready to rock and roll at all times.
a beauty.
You know what I mean? Like sticky already, so then that's gonna hold it up, and then you pull the back off, and the letters are there floating.
Yeah. Just taking some video notes here.
I just like it because it's big.
And of course, a thank you to all my friends and family who came out for the renaming ceremony.
We who venture upon your vast domain are required to pay homage. I implore you in your graciousness to take unto your records and recollection this worthy vessel hereafter and for all time known as IMILOA. Now you know. In honor of your greatness, we offer these libations to your majesty and your court. Pop it.
Regardless of all the frustrating challenges and obstacles we were faced with, a nearly lifelong fantasy of exploration, sailing, and surf had finally come to fruition. I now know with certainty that this was just the beginning.
Dolphin! 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 Right here! Oh! Dolphin! Oh! What the f? Holy shit! You gotta be kidding me! This can't be real. No way. Hundreds of years of legend. Renaming a vessel without following this time-honored tradition can incur the wrath of Poseidon. I can literally tell you from experience this is true. Every boat I've ever owned, including Ola Mango, and every boat after, there was only one boat after, we did not do this, and did we ever have any good luck with that boat?
It eventually sunk in a rainstorm in the river.
And then the boat that no.
Like for real.
Also, one of the charter companies.
Oh, honey. Oh, that's not good luck.